Hey, I'm Gina. Welcome to the Oh, There's More podcast, a space to get real and go deep. No more just checking the boxes and going through the motions. It's time to live out the beautiful life that God has written for you. Today, we will open the door to what our body remembers and how that may be affecting you even today. Welcome back, friends. I am so thankful that you're here. Truly, I am. I'm honored that you would spend your time listening to what it is that God is having me share, because I know that our time is really precious. So with that, let's dive right in. I am going to share something today that comes a lot from personal experience, and I'm just praying that it resonates with some people in a way that would help them to get curious, as always. So when we're young, basically 18 and under, and we experience trauma, our body's job is to keep us safe. We don't usually have a choice to remove ourselves from a home with an abusive parent or where there's substance abuse. We can't make or even tell someone who's abusing us to stop. And so our mind and our body do what they need to do to help us make it through day after day. Now, as we get older, we have something called agency over our own bodies. That means that we can get up, we can leave the room when we don't feel safe, we can end a relationship that isn't healthy for us, but our body doesn't necessarily know that we're now safe and that we now have a say in those situations. Our body just remembers that same old feeling and defaults to the learned response. And for me, it was being around someone who was visually intoxicated. My heart would race. I'd become hyper alert, fixated on whoever was acting out of control so that I could make sure that I was anticipating their next move. And I'd want to get away from that person or place, like, now. Talk about fight or flight. My flight response was like in full-blown mode. My body was screaming like, we aren't safe, even though in reality there was not anything that the drunk person was doing to harm me. They may not even have been interacting with me, but just being in that presence, my body remembered the feeling of not being safe for most of my childhood because of alcoholism. My body learned that drunk behavior equals unpredictability, and therefore it's not safe. I'm sure that you've heard this label of a trigger, and so many of us have them in one way or another. Our body is alerting us to something that didn't go well for us in the past, even if the situation or the circumstances aren't exactly the same. It doesn't know, it just knows that it feels the same as the past experience. And now that experience has primed the body to be on alert, to detect danger. There are a couple of books that I read that I highly recommend. You can check them out at your local library if you don't feel like buying them, or you can even listen to them on Audible. That's actually what I did. I am an avid physical book reader, but I'm so glad that I chose to just listen to these books. They can help you understand the bigger picture of trauma and what it does, particularly to children and their development. So for many of us, childhood is where it started, and having a deeper understanding of that can help so many pieces of the puzzle to connect. Little disclaimer, I love Jesus, and what I base my life off of is his word, which is truth. So these authors include a few things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with because they don't align with God and his word. I believe that we can have full and complete healing from these things, and they're not something that we have to live with forever. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to throw out all of the information that they offer. In fact, as I've gone down this path of healing, God has shown me that the physiological side of this is really important to have some understanding of. And here's why. Physiological is defined by dictionary.com as relating to the branch of biology that deals with the normal functions of living organisms and their parts, or relating to the way in which a living organism or bodily part functions. So the brain and body functions are what we are exploring for understanding. And guess who created them? God Himself. So being aware of how our bodies are made to operate and survive just helps us to have a clearer understanding of why we do what we do, so that we can find healing in those areas of our lives. And I feel like that's what these books do. So the first one you may have heard of, it's called The Body Keeps Score by Bessel A. van der Kolk. And I'm just going to read you the description straight from their website. Drawing on more than 30 years at the forefront of research and clinical practice, Bessel van der Kolk shows that the terror and isolation at the core of trauma literally reshapes both body and brain. New insights into our survival instincts explain why traumatized people experience incomprehensible anxiety and numbing and intolerable rage, and how trauma affects their capacity to concentrate, to remember, to form trusting relationships, and even to feel at home in their own bodies. Having lost the sense of control of themselves and frustrated by failed therapies, they often fear that they are damaged beyond repair. This book was so eye-opening for me, just to have that connection of like, oh, these things are happening in my body because of what happened so long ago. And it began to just help me see so much that I needed clarity on. The next book is called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog by Bruce D. Perry. I believe there's another book, something like The Boy Who Was Raised by Dogs. I actually think I even read that many years ago, but this is not the same book. This book has different content in the sense that it talks about multiple stories. And I'm going to give you a different disclaimer on this book. He talks about some really difficult traumas that these children have faced. So if that's something that's hard for you, you may want to skip this one altogether. I was a pediatric nurse. A lot of my friends were always like, how could you do that? How can you see these babies like hurt and sick? And for me, I knew that somebody had to be there to take care of them. And so it was an honor for me to be the one to do it. So just keep that in mind if you pick it up and you're like, oh my gosh, Gina recommended this book and it is horrible. So I'm going to read the description for this one as well. Child psychologist Bruce Perry has helped children faced with unimaginable horror. Genocide survivors, murder witnesses, kidnapped teenagers, and victims of family violence. In The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, he tells their stories of trauma and transformation through the lens of science, revealing the brain's astonishing capacity for healing. Deftly combining unforgettable case histories with his own compassionate, insightful strategies for rehabilitation, Perry explains what exactly happens to the brain when a child is exposed to extreme stress and reveals the unexpected measures that can be taken to ease a child's pain and help them grow into a healthy adult. Through the stories of children who recover physically, mentally, and emotional from the devastating circumstances, Perry shows how simple things like surroundings, affection, language, and touch can deeply impact the developing brain for better or for worse. And I loved this book because it gave me hope that even in the places where great damage is done, it's not all lost. And as I mentioned, my trigger was people who were obviously intoxicated. I was around 3 when my parents divorced, and my brother and I were separated and went with different parents. I was with my mom, he was with my dad. So here I am at like 3 years old, and suddenly more than half of my family is just gone. And shortly after, my mom got remarried to an alcoholic. Divorce is already traumatic for children to go through, but these additional factors played a role in my childhood trauma as well. And my body would go into this full-blown freak out mode. A while back, I was faced with a situation where I needed to go check on someone that had been drinking heavily and was hurt. And as a former nurse, like the medical part of their need for help was no big deal to me. It was more the fact that I was going into a situation where I didn't know how affected they were and how they would behave because of the alcohol. I held it together while I was there. I felt like I almost put on this tough exterior while I was in this crisis mode. But as soon as it was over and I left, I could feel this flood come over my body. I realized that I had done a lot in my adult years to minimize contact with people that were drinking. I just would avoid situations where I knew that was going to be going on. And that little girl in me could feel all of these awful feelings again. In that moment, I had to acknowledge that little girl who didn't feel safe because of someone else's choices. I'd never before truly felt the weight of that, of what I had faced as a child in that way. And I grieved for her, for me. I cried and I went for a walk because when you move your body, it helps dispel those hormones from the flight or fight response within you. And maybe an hour later, I felt back to my normal self again for the first time. Usually the effects of a trigger like this would linger so much longer. But there was something that happened in that experience that helped my body know that it was actually safe. It's experiences like these that, while they're uncomfortable in the moment, they help to retrain the body to know, hey, you're going to be okay. There's something called the window of tolerance, and it refers to how when you're triggered, the body will either go into this state of hyper arousal or hypo arousal. And hyper, which means over or in excess arousal, so overly aroused, can look like anxiety. It can look like anger, overwhelm, the feeling of wanting to just get the heck out of there and run away. And hypo, which means under or below, so like a lower arousal state than normal, can look like disconnecting or zoning out or even becoming numb or frozen. And being in situations where you can experience that trigger in a way that allows you to feel safe enough, but still letting you step into it some, allows that window of tolerance to get bigger. It's a place where your body is able to see, oh, I was okay. I don't have to have such a big reaction. You see that you're safe and that you have a different say this time. And to be able to recognize what's going on and walk through the steps of helping your body get to a state of being regulated again is such a powerful place to be. Because let me tell you, you may be familiar with this. When your body goes into that state, it feels very out of control. And there are many ways that you can help increase this window of tolerance. But please don't just take my experience from this podcast episode and throw yourself into something that feels unsafe so that you can, quote unquote, get over it. That is not the goal here. Yes, healing is the whole point, but we don't want to do it in a way that causes more harm to ourselves. We need to make sure that we're offering ourselves love and care that we need. So make sure that you've gotten to this place where you have the tools that you need to navigate it well before you just go throw yourself in situations, okay? There have been several studies done that connect these physical ailments in the body to trauma that someone has experienced. And the connection between what we've endured and the effect on the body is really eye-opening. They've seen a connection to higher heart attack rates in older age, a connection to even autoimmune diseases. It's really interesting. And while it is surprising, at the same time, like, why would they not be connected, right? We're created as body, soul, and spirit. So when we're in a situation that's past that threshold of what we can handle, of course something would take place, right? the body feels all that's happening, even if the mind or the soul separates and takes us somewhere else, not physically, but mentally. But we don't become a disconnected being. We're all of those things in one. And I share this today because knowledge of what's going on equips us to better face it and find the healing that we deserve. Yes, I wholeheartedly believe that we deserve to be made well in every sense. Jesus died on that cross for us to be made whole. Healing is there for us. We just have to figure out what it is that we need in order to be made whole. And it's a journey. It's a process that can often involve many stops along the way. Just like we're all uniquely made and our relationship with God is individual to us, so is this journey. Different people will find what they need in different places with different people and different methods. There's no one size fits all approach. And I think that's encouraging. I hope that that makes you feel hopeful too. Maybe you won't have as long of a journey as someone else, or maybe you'll find something that seems kind of out of the box, but it's what God has led you to, so you embrace it and you find what you need for healing. Like I mentioned in another episode, and in some ways there are different art projects that help me find healing. That isn't conventional, I suppose, in some ways. It maybe is more so now, but there are so many ways that God can bring healing to the places that we need it. If you've experienced some difficult things in your life, especially in your childhood, and there are things that were brought to mind as you listen today, or even as you dig into either of the books that I recommended, I want you to be encouraged. I know that probably sounds odd to say, but when the parts of our soul that are shattered are revealed, it means that we can find the healing that we need and become more whole. I have a very different outlook on life today than I did before, and it's because of what has been revealed and healed. It really changes everything. It's like the hidden things that the enemy wants to keep hidden, when they're brought to the light, just that alone takes away some of the power. So I'm excited about that healing because on the other side of it, my goodness, it's incredible. And we'll talk more in the coming episodes about what that journey looks like. I am about being real and honest, and I'll never lead you to believe that something is all roses and rainbows when it's not. However, there's never been a time where I've thought to myself, that wasn't worth it. I wish I would have just stayed the same. I can honestly say that I am a testament that healing changes everything. So thank you for sitting with me today. I love y'all, and I hope that the door that was opened for you today will bring you to places that you've needed to go for the sake of your own healing, and that you walk through them. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, leave a rating or review, and share it with your people. You can go to my website, ginapeak.com, to find extra resources and info. Until next time.